Hi, Miss Curdy here again, and today we are going to be doing topic 6.2, which is finding the area of figures, but in this case we're going to be using non-standard units. And what that means is that we're not going to be using units like a square foot, a square inch, a square mile, or our metric units like a centimeter or a meter. We are just going to be using just what we call square units, which are just going to be different sized squares. So sometimes you're going to be finding the area using really small squares. Sometimes the squares are going to be a little bit larger. And this is kind of ties into estimating because we have to fill in the figures with the size of the square that we're given. The smaller the squares that you have, the more you're going to need to cover a space. The larger the squares, the less you'll need to cover that space. So go ahead and get yourself set up with your notes for topic 6-2, and we'll get going. So again, we are going to be using non-standard units, and that just means we're not going to be calling these things inches, feet, or miles, centimeters, meters, or kilometers. We're just going to be calling them square units. In our next topic, we'll be using standard unit. In our next lesson, we'll be using standard units. For now, we're just going to call them square units as we practice. Now, for these figures, we need to use the shape given, this small square here, and fill this figure up as accurately as possible to see how many of these squares would fit in this shape. And then we have a larger square here that we're going to fill in this shape to see how many it needs. Now, the larger the square, the less you'll need, of course, and it's actually a lot easier to figure out the unit squares in using larger squares than it is for the smaller ones. So I'm actually going to do this one first. And what I like to do is kind of line it up to give myself a starting point of where to fill this in. And I can already tell that that's going to be 1 unit square, and it looks like if I break this piece in half, I would have 2. So I can tell I'm going to have 1, 2, 3 unit squares here. And again, labeling is so important in area. We always want to make sure that if we're using square units, we say we're using square units. And we can say unit squares or square units. Either one is perfectly acceptable. Now, this one's going to be a bit trickier because we need to be very accurate in seeing how many of these will fit in here. And I'm trying to be very systematic with this. So looking at this shape, the first thing I want to think to myself is how many of these do I think will fit across? And I'm going to start by making columns. And I think with my estimation, I'm going to say I can probably fit 4 of these squares across here. So that's what I'm going to start with and then start building up my rows. Now would be a good time to pause the video to give this a try on your own. I highly recommend using pencil for these problems because you may find yourself needing to erase and try again to make sure we're being as accurate as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and try to break up my column so I know I'm going to have 4. So I'm going to break it right in half, down here and down here, and this is going to be my 4 across. And I'm going to draw a line about right here to show the first 4 that I have. And now I'm going to keep building it up, trying to be as consistent and using a little bit of estimation and eyeballing it, if you will, to fill these in. So let's see what I end up with. I've got 4 across and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 down the side. So I can use my knowledge of multiplication and arrays and say that if I do 4 times 6, I'll get 24 square units. So if you paused and did this on your own, take a look and see how you did, how accurate you were. I noticed that when I first started doing this, I definitely needed to erase several times because my squares would either be too large or too small. But with some practice, I started getting really good at this, and so will you. So now is your opportunity to head to your workbook to choose one of your practice options to give 6.2 a try. And I will see you here for 6.3. Have a wonderful day. Bye.